all been knowing it is formative, assessment is formative, and evaluation is summative. Orientation is process-oriented evaluation assessment, and evaluation is product-oriented. Feedback is based on, both have feedbacks, assessment and evaluation. In assessment, the feedback is based on observation and positive and negative points, whereas in evaluation, the feedback is based on the level of quality as per the set standards that we have. A relationship between the two parties, the assessee, assessor, or evaluatee and evaluator, in both cases, the relationship in assessment is reflective always, and in evaluation, it is prescriptive. The criteria in assessment is set by both parties jointly, both the students and the teachers in this case, and in evaluation, the criteria, how the student is evaluated, is set by only the evaluator, and evaluatee has no role to play there. And measurement standards in assessment is always absolute. We look at our own standards, what can be done, what cannot be done, how much can be improved, how much it cannot be improved. It's assessed by absolute standards that we place before ourselves, whereas in evaluation, it's always comparative from one student to the other, one teacher to the other, one institution to one department with another department, one institution with another institution. One can compare and then evaluate where we stand, just as we do in NIRF ranking for the institutions, or we have other private agencies, Times Group assessing us, or NAC when it accredits. All these are comparative evaluations which are made, and then we are given a grade. Each college, each university is given a grade by NAC, or is given a score by NIRF, and a rank, because this helps in they have evaluated us and have come up with a particular judgment about our standards, which in any case will be a subject of discussion, so that how it can be improved. We all talk about this, that how in the next NAC assessment or next NIRF assessment, our evaluation standards, the kind of standards that they have maintained or criteria that they have fixed, we must see where we have gone wrong, where we have scored less, and we must try and improve and get a better performance. Evaluation can be better for us, and our score can be better. So come to assessment again, and we will repeat the same thing, but little more with a little more understanding, that assessment is a methodical way of acquiring, reviewing, and using information about someone or something so as to make improvement where necessary. The main aim is to improve. The term is interpreted in a variety of contexts. It's not just education. It can be in psychology, it can be financial, taxation. I just talked about it, taxation, and also human resource, and so on. Everything can be assessed, and we can find out how good or how can we improve our education, our financial position, or taxation, or even our human resource, which needs to be better, and all that can be assessed for improving each one of them. So it in the context can be different, but the aim remains the same. Assessment is an ongoing interactive process in which both assessor and assessee are jointly involved. Performance is assessed based on the defined standards that we keep in front of us. The process aims at determining the effectiveness of the overall performance of the assessee and the areas for improvement, which should be the final aim, to identify those areas which are weak and which need augmentation, which need support, which needs better quality, and they can be informed that these are the areas for improvement, and that is the feedback that one can give in assessment. And the process involves setting up goals to which one can reach, and also by collecting information, both qualitative and quantitative, about the teaching and learning, and using the information for improving quality of education. Evaluation, on the other hand, is derived from the word value or usefulness of something. So ultimately, we would like to know whether after the education, once one receives the education, is useful, or the kind of things that they have learned is finally useful for something or not. So evaluation is therefore an examination of something to measure the utility of that education that they have received, whether it is skill or mental ability. All these issues are important, and whether they have been able to achieve that degree of efficiency in mental ability, and in mathematical ability, in reasoning, in cognition, and other skills that we keep as an objective, say language skills or computer skills. All these are part of education, and we want them to achieve these while learning. And by evaluating, by examining many of these, we would be able to measure whether the person who has been educated has actually achieved this, and to what extent they are useful for the society. Evaluation is a systematic and objective process of measuring or observing someone or something with an aim of drawing conclusions using, of course, criteria usually governed by a set standards or by making a comparison, which I have been telling you most of the times, the comparison between departments, between schools, and between educational institutions within the country, abroad,
was Hippocrates,
and
who
departments
wrote
and
that the
programs.
leaves
They
and the
all can
bark
be
of the willow
compared.
tree
So
was able
the
to relieve
standards, one
the
can have
pain,
prefixed standards
especially
by which
in
one
women.
can
Now
institutions.
has
It
become
gauges the
the
performance of a
over-the-top
person.
counter medicine, which we all
It
know
can
as
also
aspirin.
evaluate a completed project that has been done,
Since ancient
or it
times,
can
the Indian
evaluate a product, a process, to determine basically its worth or significance, whether that is useful, whether that product is good or not necessary, or not significantly good. Evaluation includes both quantitative and qualitative analysis of data, and undertaken once in a while. Unlike assessment, which is a continuous process of improvement, but the evaluation cannot be done all the time. It has to be done once in a while, maybe once in 6 months, like we do in a semester, and provide the evaluations, which may be done comprehensively, which may be done continuously, but the actual final grades are given once, maybe in 6 months, and in 3 months, and in 6 months, or even after 1 year. So this evaluation is not always continuous, and is undertaken once in a while. And the more often it is done, it's better. And it ascertains whether the standards or goals established are met or not. Every program, every course has its own standards. It has every institution, every course, every program has its own goals, and whether they are met or not is it can be evaluated. And if they are made successfully, then it identifies the difference between actual and intended outcomes. So assessment can be seen in terms of this cycle of assessment. It is a continuous process, and it's a cycle in the sense that it goes on and on in relation to mission, the purpose, and the goals that are set before our education process. And first, it identifies the outcomes. What exactly is the need, or what we as teachers, as educators, would like to have the outcomes. Generally, they're mentioned in advance, or we prescribe them. And then we develop methodology of assessing to identify the outcomes, and then we gather and interpret those evidences that we collect and then finally we again implement the change, so that and then again go with the same process of identifying outcomes of those changes and developing methodology, gather and interpret evidences. So this is a continuous process in which the cycle continues time and again, and it connects the broader missions, purpose, goals, and objectives, and in which we ask these questions generally: what is the purpose of doing this assessment? We must ask exactly what do we achieve through this assessment, and how does this purpose fit in the larger context of the broader missions, purpose, goals, and objectives. Then we have to identify the outcomes or the learning objectives. Generally, it's mentioned in each course, each programs. We have certain objectives, learning objectives. And are these, we ask ourselves, are these outcomes, objectives measurable or not? We just can't have objectives which are not measurable. How will I know if they are achieved also? And for that, we need to develop methods by which we can identify, not only identify, but assess the outcomes. So how do we assess the outcomes? Do we have access to data, or can gather data to measure these outcomes? What methods and measures will we use? These are the issues which will guide us to develop methodology of collecting the data and gathering the data, measuring the outcomes, and methods and measures will guide us to how to collect the evidences for our understanding. Then we need to interpret those evidences by analyzing the results and interpreting the results based on learning outcomes and assessment purpose. Suppose you have a learning outcome in which you want that at the end of this course, you would expect the students to develop higher cognitive levels or the skills in comparing two things. Now, if that is the purpose, whether the students are actually been able to do it or not, by interpreting the data that we collect in the while the course is on, we will know how much is being done and how much needs to be done more. And sometimes we need to continuously give this feedback to the students that, well, we wanted your language skills to improve, but you are unable to do it for the following reasons. We wanted your mathematical skills to improve, or statistical interpretation to go to a higher cognitive level, but it hasn't reached for the following reasons. So all this information can be done by collecting data, both quantitative and qualitative, or using mixed methods. One can get the information and interpret and inform the students so that they can improve their performance in the next few months. So not wait for the final examination, but before the final examination comes, one can use these evaluations to improve by the time they reach the final examination. Their product is coming out, which will be good in that case. Then if we identify the problems, then we can implement the change. Suppose we find that the students are not able to develop higher cognitive levels, they can't make critical comments, or they can't develop the critical faculty, then we can make changes in our assessment plan and begin again, so that we need to change curriculum, we need to change topics, we may need to add or delete something from somewhere, and so that the changes after being implemented, we would like to examine again whether those changes have resulted in better cognitive ability, or better understanding, or learning objectives are better met. And for that, assessment plays an important role, which is a cyclic one, continues to be done all the time. In evaluation, which is a systematic assessment of the, as I've told you, is the final assessment of the worth or the merit of something. Evaluation is therefore a process of assessing, measuring the educational system as a whole. It's not only students who are being evaluated and they are given grades. The entire education system comes under some kind of evaluation, which all of us know that and assessment and evaluation, which they use interchangeably here also in NEP. And they have suggested a very, very widespread changes. They have suggested revolutionary changes to the existing system of the education from primary school up to the higher education level. And you can see the fundamental changes which are coming slowly, perhaps in the next few years. These will be implemented and will be again subject to assessment, whether we are going in the right direction or not. But it has certainly evaluated the old system through assessment and measures the education system. And the student is supposed to acquire objectives like knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes through classroom learning. This is evaluation. We need to emphasize that ultimately the student should be evaluated for the knowledge that he or she has acquired, whether and not just knowledge, but understanding and skills and attitudes, and that all that has been achieved through classroom learning. And what are the principles of evaluation is something that we need to talk about. Principles of evaluation includes the fact that it's a continuous and ongoing process. We cannot have just one exam. This is one of the major criticism of the older examination system, which we had after independence for quite some time, continued as one-time examination, maybe at the end of a year, after end of 2 years, and that also memory based only. We could
has been used as a
we
medicine
had long examination.
to
We also
combat
had
many
one examination at the
diseases
end of the
and
program,
fight cancer.
whether it's intermediate or it was BA or BSc or MA, MSc. We had only one examination at the end, and that was found to be absolutely flawed as a principle of evaluation, because I could not actually judge the merit of the students. And that is what is important, whether when we evaluate, whether we are actually objectively evaluating the standards and what are the methodologies. Now it is understood that all evaluations have to be a continuous and ongoing process. And it should be much more than just determining the outcome of learning. That is a way of gauging learning over time. Learning and evaluation are never completed. They are always evolving and developing. So one of the most important aspects of evaluations is that the tools that we use to evaluate must be varied and not a single tool.
And I
just
teach
like
in St. Mary's
examination
College,
is a single
Shillong.
tool. Now that should be avoided to the extent possible.
Course is
Our
intended
evaluation
for
has
the
to be
BSc
multifarious,
and
has to be
MSc
comprehensive,
students,
and not
prerequisites
necessarily
of this course include
dependent on a
ethnobotany
single
and economic
tool,
botany.
Which will not provide an accurate assessment of students' learning and progress.
Modules under
This has been
course
already
are 5 in number,
identified
include
by most
introduction,
assessments
concept,
of evaluation,
ingredients and
methods,
classification of
and tools
nutraceuticals,
used by
the category
colleges
of
and universities and most
nutraceuticals and health
educational
benefits
institutions.
of nutraceuticals, examples of nutraceuticals, and nutraceuticals
If we use
in
one type of tool only,
Indian markets.
that would exclude other types, because the students themselves cannot be subject to a single type of learning, evaluation tools.
What are they
and
used
that will
for?
basically
And a
rub
brief
the students
historical aspect of
to measure
nutraceuticals.
many other
What
aspects
are
of
nutraceuticals?
the program
According to the
that should be
definition
part of
of
the evaluation,
nutraceuticals, it is
and
defined as
single
any substance that
tool
is a food or
like
part
written
of a food
examination,
and provides
or
medical
say
or health benefits,
we do
including the
sometimes
prevention of
for the
diseases.
sake of easy evaluation, a
It
multiple
is
choice
the
questions. Just
bioactive
think of one
compounds
multiple choice
that are
question.
found in the
100
foods,
questions are given, and then
particularly in plants, which have the
evaluation is
capacity
completed.
to
That will
synthesize
not evaluate the students' other aspects of evaluation like cognitive ability or synthesizing capacity. It only evaluate one aspect of the students'
Terminology
understanding. So that's why one should
alter the
avoid
life
to focus
processes
on one type of
in
tool
nutrient,
to
which
the
is
human
exclusion of
beings.
composed of
others,
food, and
which will deprive
pharmaceutical,
students of
which is
valuable learning opportunities.
carotenoids, and
Let
so
us
much
look at
more.
the terminology.
Evaluation must be a collaborative activity between teachers and students.
Particularly in
Students
plants,
must be able to
which have the
assume an
capacity
active role
to
in
synthesize
evaluation so that
phenolics,
they can begin to develop
flavonoids,
individual
caffeine,
responsibilities for
carotenoids, and
development
so much
and
more.
also self-monitoring. They
Different
themselves should know
bioactive compounds
where they're
can
going
change
wrong
or
and
alter the
consists of
life.
evaluation also needs to be absolutely authentic. There cannot be a lot of subjectivities involved. It should be so authentic, so much based on objective criteria that it should be accepted by both the evaluators and evaluatee. It should be based on
Is
the
the
natural activities and
bioactive
processes
compounds
students
that are
do
found in
both in the classroom and in their everyday lives. For example, suppose we are relying on a very formalized testing procedures, like I told you about the the multiple choice
carotenoids and so much more.
What does it
Different
signify? That
bioactive compounds can
learning
change or
is
alter the
simply a
life
search
processes
for right
in
answers, that whether A is right or D is right. So a learning finally, it
in
gives a message, a
human
wrong message, I
beings.
would say, that learning is just for searching a right answer. That, but how can learning be just for right answer? There could be there cannot be just binary answers to everything in life, that
Beings.
either you are right or you are wrong. That kind of situation, you'd agree with me that one has to ultimately learn that there's no
Let us
binary
look at the
answers to every
terminology
question.
in
There's
nutraceuticals.
a range of
Nutraceuticals
answers.
consist of
There's
two
there's
words:
a lot of
nutrient, which is a component of
gradation
food,
in answers.
and
Answers can
pharmaceutical,
be always
which
graded.
is a
Now
medicinal
this has
drug.
to be learned
It
in the
was
classroom also.
first
Otherwise,
coined
if our
by
evaluation methods are basically
Stephen D. Fellis
highly formalized testing
in the
procedures,
year
whether this we would say
1989,
the student is
was
right
the
or wrong,
founder and
then the
chairman of the
students also
Foundation of
gain
Innovation in
that
Medicine,
message that
and he was also known as the father
ultimately
of
we have to
nutraceuticals.
in our life we have to learn something. Either we are right or we are wrong, but that's not the basic purpose of education. We have to tell them that the life is much more complex, the issues are much more complex, and
When
the answers
comparing
cannot be
a
just right and
pharmaceutical
wrong.
and a
Because
nutraceutical
there should be
compound,
much other way. Critical thinking is far more important than just saying right or
most
wrong
of the
answers.
diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular,
So the
and
characteristics of
obesity occur because
evaluation
of
is that
incorrect
it's a
diet and
comprehensive
lifestyle.
process which
That is why
assesses all aspects of
nutraceuticals are
students'
important
development, not just
in
one
prevention
that
of
is
the
written
disease
examination, but
as well as
many other
promoting
aspects
health.
should be evaluated. There are different techniques which
In
are used
most
by the teachers to
countries,
evaluate the performance
the
of the learner. So techniques also
nutraceuticals
should
are
be equally
taken as part of dietary
varied.
supplements.
It
A
also has to be
dietary
continuous
supplement is
process, not
considered
just
as a
at the
product
end
that
of the
bears
semester
one
or
of
at
the
the end of the
following
year,
dietary
but it should
ingredients.
be throughout the semester, throughout the
When comparing a
program
pharmaceutical and a
of different
nutraceutical
kind,
compound,
not
both
just one
are
type.
able to
It is
cure,
not
but
examination,
only
but examination
pharmaceutical
is part of
compounds
evaluation
have
process. So
governmental
don't confuse
sanctions.
between, don't, we generally think evaluation means
So, the
examination.
philosophy
Evaluation
behind
is not examination.
nutraceuticals is actually to
Evaluation is
focus
much
on
greater than
actually
examination.
prevent.
Examination is one of the tools only. There is no fixed time limit for the completion of the evaluation work, but it's a continuous process which must be adhered to by every evaluator. And the functions of evaluation is not just the summarization of results and giving
From
the
comparing
students what
a pharmaceutical
grade they
and a
got or
nutraceutical
what marks they got.
compound,
It has
both
direct bearing
are
on
able
improvement
to
of the
cure,
system as a whole.
but only
that gives us a
pharmaceutical
feedback
compounds
not
have
on the student,
governmental
because you can't do anything.
sanctions.
Once the evaluations are made, the students have got degrees, they have
So,
their
the
grades or
philosophy
divisions they
behind
have got.
nutraceuticals is
but
actually to focus
The entire
on
exercise
actually
does
preventing
give you feedback
rather than
about improving the
cure.
system as a whole. It also provides feedback to know the strength and weaknesses of the students, which question they could answer, which question they couldn't answer, which type, which area, which kind of evaluation somebody did better and other they could not do as good. All these feedbacks come back, showing the strengths and weaknesses of the students in a particular kind of evaluation, and that should go as a feedback
The
to
Yellow
the system.
Emperor's Book
It
of
creates
Medicine,
motivational effect towards better attainment
the
and growth.
term
Also, if somebody does
reduced.
bad in one semester, would like to compensate and understand why it happened, and it can go to this student can do better in the next.
Although the
It
term
encourages in building good
nutraceuticals
study
sounds
habits
like a
also.
recent
It helps teach and guiding the
phenomena,
growth of pupils.
food has been
It
used
helps in
as
locating
medicine
the areas that require remedial
since
measures.
the
If somebody
2nd
does
and
very
3rd
bad in a
century.
particular course, like we
And
find
here are some examples
in
of
Northeast,
that.
in our departments, that the students have a lot
In
of
the 3rd
problems with
century,
thought,
the first
or they have
Chinese medical
problems with
book
in geography, I mean, in statistics. Now we know that some of them do not have this background, and we can find out who are actually, by evaluation, we can find out who need remedial courses. They can be
in the
given
3rd
extra time.
century.
So that also comes as a help from the evaluation. Helps the evaluation helps the teacher in planning, organizing, and implementing learning activities, and it becomes a basis for revision of curriculum also. Once we 2-3 years or 5 years, when we do evaluate, we understand that there's something wrong with the curriculum and that needs to be revised, because the students
The
find it
soldiers
very difficult or
who were
find it very
suffering
easy,
with
and
bleeding
it perhaps
gums
standard can be
with
improved
the
in our
citrus
curriculum.
fruit.
And
It
it
was
helps
later
also
found out
inter-institutional
that citrus
comparison
fruits have
when we
vitamin
find
C.
out
Another
our students are how
example
good or
was
bad they are in
Hippocrates,
terms of
who wrote
standards
that the leaves and the bark of the willow tree was able to relieve
institutions
the
within the country
pain,
or outside.
especially
And some of the
in
evaluation
women
devices that
who were
we
in
use are
labor,
written examination, which is very
which
common to all of
now
us. We
has
also use
become
oral
the over-the-top
examination,
counter
practical
medicine, which we
examination,
all know
observations,
as
interviews,
aspirin.
questionnaire, checklist, rating scale, records. All these
Since ancient
can be
times,
used as
the Indian
devices,
bay leaf
and
has been used
most
as a
important
medicine
is that we start in
to
evaluation.
combat
We
many
instead of
diseases
giving marks,
and fight
we
cancer.
must shift towards grading. We find or most people find educationists find grading is much better than
lesser or
evaluating
no
in
adverse
marks,
effects.
because of
It is
problem
economically
with marks. The
affordable.
limitations are
It
high
is easily
in
available.
marking,
It has
whereas
multiple
grading helps
therapeutic
in better
effects and
comparison.
increases the health value
Evaluations,
by
this is so
improving
because
medical
evaluations
conditions
are
of
subjective
humans.
process. No evaluation can be objective, although we always claim that we have been
Thus,
objective.
food
But
as medicine is
evaluations
preferred
can hardly be objective
because
of
new
inherent
molecules are difficult to
subjective
discover and more
process
expensive
which go
and
into
risky than
making of
ever.
questions, making of
Over the
or
past
selecting a
100
particular
years, there has
type
been a
of
development and
evaluation
mass
technique.
production
All these
of
are subjective processes.
chemically
As such, they may be objective when you evaluate, but there are many the instruments that we use, the type that we use. All these
synthesized
are
drugs,
basically subjective processes,
which has
and
really
comparison also
revolutionized
becomes
healthcare
easier
in most
in
parts of the
grading.
world. However, there are large
I'll give
sections
you an
of the
example.
population in developing
Say
countries that
somebody in
still
English
rely on the
or
traditional
in
practices
Assamese
and
literature
herbal medicines for their
gets
primary
65 and
health
70
care.
or 70, and
In
we
Africa,
find it's
up to
excellent. A brilliant
90%
student only
and
can
in
get
India up to
70%.
70%
But
of the
in
population
statistics and
still
mathematics,
depend
a
on
brilliant student
these
gets 95.
traditional
Now, if we
medicines to help
give
and meet their
these marks, they are
healthcare
not
needs.
comparable. 60 is not comparable. 70 is not comparable to 95.
Since evidence is
But
now strong that
in
eating
grades, they are
habits
comparable.
can
Because
support the
a
health
brilliant student of English
and
gets
wellness
A plus or O.
of
A brilliant
humans
student of student of
Thus,
mathematics also
this
gets
course
O,
will
in
provide
terms of marks,
more in-depth,
the later
comprehensive
95 in the form of
understanding.
70.
Evidence
So
is now
70 and
strong
90
that
is a
eating
gap of
evidence
20
is now
marks,
strong
where you would say that okay,
since
the
evidence is
student of
now strong
mathematics gets much higher than the student of English,
and
who are both first
its
in their
impact
class. But
on
that's not true in grading. In grading,
human
it says both
prosperity.
have got O, and that is therefore
Thank
much
you.
better. And grading is, evaluation, and through grading, we do
Good
do
morning
the
and welcome to
evaluation
the first module,
using
which is
qualitative
Introduction to
method and not
Nutraceuticals
simply
under the
called
course
the
titled
quantitative method, which is the
Nutraceuticals.
marks.
My name
So
is
therefore,
Ms.
in a way,
Rumia
grades are
Lindo,
better than marks.
and I
But in most cases, you'll find in India, we actually convert grades into, so grades are actually conversion of marks. We first evaluate in terms of marks, and then those marks are converted into grades, which is not a correct thing to do. We should use our subjective evaluation process, subjective evaluation by grades first, and then convert them into grade points rather than marks. So we should have grades and grade points rather than marks. And the only problem in grades is that the scales, the grade point averages in terms of scales create problems, and we need some kind of uniformity should come to all the universities in the country, which should be internationally acceptable and comparable. If that happens, then grades are much superior to marks. And most countries, most educational institutions are now giving up marks altogether and have accepted grades as a better way of expressing expressing the judgments about the performance of students or institutions, which would be in terms of grades. The new education policy, which I was talking about, actually places enormous importance on these two key elements of assessment and evaluation. And they have given a very detailed guidelines as to how to go about assessment and evaluation. But I must confess that even in this, they have used assessment and evaluation more like interchangeable words, and not much differences have been made conceptually as to what assessment is and evaluation is. But as I've told you in the beginning, the aim is the same, to improve both assessment and evaluation have the aims of improving the education system. And if you look at the NEP, you can see that it recommends a very robust but very flexible evaluation system in consonance with this NEP 2020 objectives. The objectives of this is that all evaluations should be continuous and comprehensive, which we have discussed already. It should be criterion-based grading system, which we have discussed a while ago, but it should be criterion-based grading system and learning outcome-based education and evaluation. These are the three objectives which have been mentioned in the NEP 2020 as far as the evaluation is concerned. Continuous and comprehensive evaluation is something that embraces horizontal assessment modes instead of one single vertical mode, which I've discussed already, that there should be an emphasis should not be laid on one single mode of assessment or evaluation. It should be horizontal, which means it should be used to assess many areas for overall development of students. That should include critical thinking, whether the students have been able to develop critical thinking,
I teach in
whether they
St.
have
Mary's
able,
College,
in terms,
Shillong.
after
The
the course and program is over, whether they have been able to develop
course is
problem-solving
intended for
ability,
the
whether they have been
BSc
able to
and MSc students,
write application of
and
knowledge,
prerequisites
and
of this course
also
include
adherence to ethics. All
ethnobotany
these
and
aspects
economic
must be
botany.
evaluated
Modules
as a
under this
horizontal
course
mode
are 5
and not
in
just
number,
vertical mode
which
by giving
include
them one
introduction,
single type of
Concept,
evaluation.
ingredients, and classification of
or
nutraceuticals,
questions
the
for
category
evaluation.
of nutraceuticals
The
and health
criterion-based
benefits
grading
of
system
nutraceuticals,
emphasizes assessment
examples
of
of
student
nutraceuticals
achievement based
and
on the learning goals
nutraceuticals
for each
in
program.
the
Pro-
Indian
which-
markets.
The criteria must be
Some
developed
of the learning
and
outcomes
the
in
grades
this
can be
video
given for
include
each of the criteria
what are
with regard
nutraceuticals,
to
what are they
learning
used
goals
for,
which have been
and
set
a brief
before
historical
the
aspect
student
of
for the course or
nutraceuticals.
for the program. A
What are
criterion actually defines the
nutraceuticals?
characteristics or traits
According
to be
to
judged.
the
These are
definition of
derived from learning
nutraceuticals, it
outcomes.
is defined as any substance that is a
Grading can
food
be
or part
designed
of
to
a
measure
food
the degree
and
of
provides
achievement
medical or
on
health
each
benefits,
criteria,
including the
thus
prevention
making assessments
of
more
diseases.
meaningful, which we have discussed.
It is
Outcome-based
the
education and
bioactive
evaluation basically
compounds
advocates
that are found in the
importance
foods,
of establishing a clear
particularly in
picture
plants,
of what is
which have the
important for
capacity
students to be able
to
to do,
synthesize
and then
phenolics,
organizing the curriculum,
flavonoids,
instruction, and assessment
caffeine,
to make
carotenoids,
sure
and so
that
much
this
more.
learning ultimately happens.
Different
So outcome
bioactive
becomes most
compounds
significant,
can
and that
change or
should be
alter the life processes
fixed
in
for the
human
students
beings.
so that the learning outcomes stick to it or conforms to those fixed outcome-based performance.
Let us look
And
at
this is
the
necessary to assess
terminology
modern
in
skills and domain-specific
nutraceuticals.
competencies.
Nutraceuticals consist of two
computer
words:
skills,
nutrient, which is a component of
language
food,
skills,
and pharmaceutical,
and
which is a
so many other
medicinal
depending
drug.
on domain.
It was
knowledge
first
specific or
coined
discipline
by
specific, understanding.
Stephen D. Fellis.
This is
in
what
the year
NEP prescribes for an
1989.
evaluation system.
He was the founder
that,
and chairman of the
you can see
Foundation
this
of
diagram.
Innovation in
What
Medicine.
should students know
And he
and
was
be able
also known
to
as the
do by
father
the end
of
of the course must
nutraceuticals.
be clear to begin with. And then what will you do to get them there, the methodology,
Most
and
of
how
the
will you
diseases
know
like
if they get there?
diabetes,
And that will take you to
cardiovascular,
again the second
and
question, what will you
obesity
do to
occur
get them
because
there?
of
Learning outcomes actually drive the curriculum, then the instruction, and the evaluation. So these are the three aspects which needs to be taken care. Accordingly, the questions that need to be addressed are these three. What should students know and be able to do by the end of the course? What will you do to get them there? And how will you know if they get there or not? This leads to the identification of outcomes, competencies, performance indicators, and finally assessment. So this is the outcome leading to competency, competency to performance indicator, and identify assessment type, frequency of application,
incorrect
and
diet and lifestyle.
questions.
That is why nutraceuticals are important in
This is very interesting
prevention of the
as a
disease,
diagram
as well as
which
promoting
shows
health.
that any evaluation and assessment system must test different
In
levels
most
of cognitive
countries,
assessment.
the
As I've told you,
nutraceuticals
the
are taken as
evaluation and
part
assessment
of dietary
of
supplements.
students
A dietary
cannot be a
supplement is
single method,
considered as a
but
product
within
that
that
bears
system, we must see
one of the
that
following
they
dietary
understand
ingredients.
they are evaluated for these four things that are mentioned, and you can see
When
that
comparing
it goes
a
on
pharmaceutical and
decreasing
a
in
nutraceutical
terms of volume.
compound,
But in
both
terms of
are able to cure,
intellectual effort,
but only
it's
pharmaceutical
actually increasing
compounds have
from
governmental
understanding and
sanctions.
remembering is the basic primary thing. Applying
So,
what you
the
have understood
philosophy
and remembered,
behind
they must be used for
nutraceuticals is
applying,
actually to
analyzing, and
focus on
evaluating. Then
actually
that must be
preventing
used for creating and
rather
innovating,
than
and
curing the
finally
disease.
culminating in
So,
developing
according to
sustainable
the
solutions.
saying by a
Ultimately,
great
what we
physician,
want,
Hippocrates,
the product
he
that
was
we
also known
want
as the
from
father of medicine,
universities and
who
colleges,
said,
that they
"Let
should
food
be responsible
be
citizens,
your
and their
medicine."
knowledge should
And this is
be
the basis for which nutraceuticals were
competencies to be
produced.
developed in developing sustainable solutions to the problems that come in front of them, whichever skills they acquire.
Although
So
the
across
term
these levels, mental
nutraceuticals
skills
sounds
or
like a
knowledge, as
recent
we call them, are
phenomena,
tested, which
food
deal
has
with
been
how a
used
student
as
acquires
medicine
processes or utilizes
since
the knowledge in
the
these four levels.
second and
The
third
levels
century.
represent a continuum of
And here
increasing,
are some examples
increasing
of
cognitive
that.
complexity, which is the main aim of testing
In the
in
3rd
terms of
century,
evaluation, whether the
the
students
first
are able
Chinese
to
medical book,
move
the Yellow
from
Emperor's Book of Medicine, listed
mere remembrance
fruits, animals, and vegetables for
to
optimum
creating
health, which was the
developing
first
sustainable
dietary
solutions
guideline
through
in the
application,
world.
through creating and innovating,
James
and
Lind
finally developing
was a
sustainable
British
solutions which are basically
Navy soldier
increasing
who
cognitive complexity of
helped to
understanding,
conquer a
and that
disease
needs to be
known
evaluated
as
whether
scurvy
we
in
are
the
finally getting
1700s. He
students
treated the soldiers
evaluated
who
for
were suffering
these
with
aspects
bleeding
rather
gums
than simply
with
giving them marks on the
the
basis of a
citrus
single
fruit.
mode of
It was
evaluation.
later found out that citrus fruits have
So how do
vitamin
we
C.
actually do it in the classroom? Assessment
Another
must be
example
continuous,
was
evaluations must be
Hippocrates,
continuous,
who wrote
and
that
include
the
a variety
leaves
of
and the bark of
assessments
the
for
willow
continuous
tree
and
was
complete
able to relieve
feedback.
the
So what we do is
pain,
that these assessments
especially
which are
in
talking
women
about
who were in labor,
can
which
be
now
done on a daily
has
basis or
become
can be on the
the
basis of
over-the-top
unit
counter medicine which we
assessment,
all
or can
know
be done at the
as
end of the course.
aspirin.
And they should be oriented
Since
towards
ancient
soft skill
times,
development
the
through
Indian
seminar
bay
and group
leaf
discussions,
has been used as a
reading and
medicine
analyzing interpretation
to
presentation
combat
through
many
self-study seminars and group
diseases
discussions.
and
We
fight
can
cancer.
develop these skills by work-based training, that is through
Some
projects,
of the
and
major
also
benefits of
problem-solving exercises
nutraceuticals
can be
over
given to them through
pharmaceuticals
tutorials. These are the
include
techniques which we can follow in the
lesser
classrooms,
or no
and
adverse effects.
on a daily
It is
if it has to be done,
economically
the
affordable.
assessment has to be made.
It
One
is
can give
easily
class assignments,
available.
home assignments, or
It
case
has
studies
multiple
on a weekly
therapeutic
basis,
effects
a daily basis,
and
or weekly basis. We can have
increases the health
assignments, quiz
value
tests.
by
At the
improving
end of the
medical
unit,
conditions of humans.
when an unit is over, we can have an unit assessment through
Thus,
quizzes and
food as
tests,
medicine is preferred
and that will be interim.
because
That the first
new
one is formative, the
molecules are
second one is
difficult to
interim, and
discover
third one is
and
summative, that
more
is
expensive
evaluation.
and risky than
End of the
ever.
course, we can have a long test.
Over the past 100
But
years,
in the
there
interim,
has
we can
been a
have quiz and
development
tests
and
and
mass
quiz and
production
tests,
of
etc. for
chemically
unit assessment.
synthesized
And
drugs,
but continuous basis, we can have
which
class
has really
assignments, home assignments, case studies,
revolutionized healthcare in most
assignments,
parts of the world.
tests, etc.
However,
But
there are large
alongside,
sections
we
of the
should have
population
all
in
these
developing countries
soft
that
skill development,
still rely on the
analyzing
traditional
interpretation
practices and
presentations,
herbal
and work-based
medicines for
training
their
and
primary
survey
health care.
exercises. These are assessment
In
and
Africa,
evaluation
up
techniques
to
which NMB
90% and in
considers
India up to
important. The tools
70%
that
of
they
the
suggest is
population
it should be
still
criterion
depend
reference
on these
assessment, that is
traditional
process of
medicines
evaluating
to help
students
and
based on
meet
the
their
pre-specific
health
criteria for
care needs.
competency-based outcomes, or it can be rubrics.
Since evidence is
That
now
method
strong
is
that
which is
eating
a method of
habits
grading
can
assignments
support
based on
the
certain
health
criteria
and
and help the
wellness
learners to
of
understand the performance
humans.
criteria and performance
Thus,
expectations. For
this
example, we
course
can have
will provide
if you have a
more in-depth,
you can create a
comprehensive
rubric and inform the
understanding
students in advance
on
that
the
an
health
evaluation of an
benefits
essay
of
would
nutraceuticals
mean that
and
the content will
its
be given
impact on
30%
human
weightage. The
prosperity.
language would be given another 20%
Thank you.
weightage. The spelling mistakes would mean correct spelling would mean this much weightage, and all these rubrics are created for an evaluation that is given to the students in advance. That helps the students in knowing which are the areas which should be given more importance. So that will give helps the learners to understand the performance criteria and performance expectation. That means what the teacher expects more is on spelling mistakes, or on more expectation is from content or analytical skills or argumentative skills. Then there could be also tools or portfolios based on collecting the students' work for assessment, like we do collect the students' work for assessment. It can be developed using technology. Nowadays, of course, many universities are using technology, particularly web-based e-portfolio for each student for authentic assessment. And teachers go on looking at asking them to write everything in that web-based e-portfolio, and the portfolios are examined by everyone, including the evaluator. Then there'll be peer assessment. It helps the learner to get feedback from their peers and improve their performance. And finally, self-assessment, process of knowing what the learners already know, what they want to know, and what they have learned. All these are important because we can't just leave everything to the, we cannot just leave the students as a recipient. and not an active participant in the learning process, because they have certain expectations. They also know what, if we create a curriculum in which we repeat what they already know, they would be dissatisfied, they will not take interest. So all those things we will know, and the students can, through self-assessment, can always inform the system how it can be improved better. So the use of assessment method that would assess all aspects of learning, including discipline, knowledge, and skills, include time constant examinations we can have closed open book examination, we can have problem-based assignments, we can give them practical assignment reports, we can ask them for observation, through observation of practical skills. Then there could be individual project reports that can be assigned to them, case study reports. Team project reports are equally important. Then we can also assess them through or evaluate them through team projects, oral presentations, including seminar presentations. Vivabocy interviews and tests are equally important. Then there could be computerized adaptive testing also. If you know adaptive testing, which are now followed by many, it is not a single test or not uniform questions to all, but it goes on changing at the if you complete a particular level, then in a new the new question that appears to you, and it's all individually based, not for everyone, that if you answer one question correctly, then the next question will come to a slightly more difficult question, and if you answer that correctly, it will come back. Another question will come, which will be even more difficult. So difficulty level increases with every question that you answer correctly, and if you answer wrongly, then it will go back to the same level questions, more of them. So computer itself adapts to your testing level, and goes on giving you questions which are customized for your level of the student's level of understanding. Then there could be peer and self-assessment. There could be examination on demand. If the students themselves want that we need to be examined, one should accept that. And there could be modular certification to facilitate exit and re-entry of learners into the education system. All these are important tools, assessment method that we must accept. Then, of course, you know, semester and cumulative grading systems are well known to you, which gives you semester grade point average, or SGPA, and cumulative grade point average, that is CGPA, which measures performance of students for the work done in a semester and across all semesters respectively. And numerically, they're expressed up to 3 decimal places at the most, or you can even have 2 decimal points. SGPA is the ratio of sum of the product of the number of credits with the grade points scored in all the courses taken, and sum of the number of credits of all the courses completed. That means you take the course, because the grades achieved by a student may vary from course to course, and these courses may have different credits number. It can range from 1 credit to 8 credits or 10 credits. Whatever is the credit, that can be multiplied with the grade point average, and then total it, and the whole thing should be summed up to be divided by the total number of credits, which will give you the SGPA. That is this semester grade point average. And the same thing for 4 or 5 or 6 semesters, when the program is completed, can be repeated to get the CGPA, which will finally give you an assess. The student can get to know what is the final grade that the person they received from when it's cumulated from each semester, and it's averaged at the end of the program. In conclusion, effective, goal-oriented teaching learning sequence contains clearly understood objectives, productive classroom activities, and a sufficient amount of feedback to make students aware of the strengths and weaknesses of their performance. That should be the main aim. Assessment and evaluation are related to both instructional objectives and classroom learning activities, and are indispensable elements in learning process. They are useful for gathering data or information needed into various interests. The data can be used to make decisions about the content and method of instruction, to make decisions about classroom's climate, to help communicate what is important, and to assign grades. Thank you. Any questions? Hello,
No,
can you
sir.
hear?
Sir,
Yes.
so as you have discussed, there are numerous way of assessment.
Yeah.
That means, do you think that we should totally avoid the evaluation that we are doing now? For example, after the semester, we are having now a semester examination.
Huh.
So can we replace that totally? Because
No.
that also consumes a lot of time, basically. So, and
No,
these
no, no.
months, these are like practically looks very, very challenging.
See, what the new NEP recommends is this, and many good institutions follow this method.
Yes,
But what happens that our problem is number of students. Our
exactly.
problem is the number of teachers and the
Yes.
teacher-student ratio.
Right.
That is a problem which we suffer from, and that's why these questions come to us naturally,
Yes.
rather than the efficacy or the goodness of this system.
Right.
We are more worried about the burden that comes to us.
Yeah, because that is a real thing.
Because evaluations are the key aspect of any educational system. Whether it's schools or colleges, continuously teachers are loaded with evaluation work. So teaching and evaluation becomes so much burdensome that when the institution demands from higher education that you have to write projects, you have to complete projects, you have to also publish research papers, and you have to write books or articles, then we think we really find it extremely difficult, and I sympathize with myself and yourself, everyone. This is a real problem with Indian education system, where our teacher-student ratio is extremely high, and implementing this may sound very good, this may sound very promising, but actually implementing, as you rightly say, can have its disastrous effects on teachers' health, and ultimately it may not succeed. The objective with which it is being implemented may not succeed, and that is what is a distinct possibility. I don't deny that, but my point was not that. Maybe the government would say that when we implement it, we'll slowly improve, we will give more teachers, we'll provide more resources, we'll do everything possible to see that the loads are not as high as you presume it to be, assuming that the number of teachers will remain the same and the students' strength will increase. That may not be the case. But what I'm saying that first, let us understand whether they are doable or not, and whether they are acceptable or not as good measures in the new education policy. I think, to my mind, it's absolutely necessary to shift from the traditional way of assessment and evaluation to this new method of doing it. The other things are more of demand-based, and we can always point out that this is not feasible with the existing teacher-student ratio, and we can always demand for decreasing student-teacher ratio and making this system more effective by doing so, or the more space, more teachers, more infrastructure are something which we will demand from the system. But we can't just throw the baby with the bathwater, because we find that the load is going to be more on us. Well, it may for some time, but I'm sure something better will emerge, and government will certainly look after these dimensions. They can't leave us to die with a heavy workload.
Yes, basically there is no denial that these are excellent things, and we want to implement this. That's why we are also getting this
I
kind
know
of
we are all tensed. We are
Yes.
all tensed because this is asking too much from us. But there are also people who say that we have been lazy for very long. We have not been doing many of these things. We think that taking 2 or 3 hours of classes and examination of one kind is sufficient, and we don't teachers don't engage themselves in many of these issues. They just don't think that they are part of the system and they have to continuously change, and they should be agents of change, which teachers think that no, they are just there to complete the course and go away, or evaluate exam transcripts and go away. I know, being in the system, I know how traumatic it has been for us, even in the existing system. But at the same time, we need to be part of the system. We need to be an agent of change, and not just become in the, and but I'm sure the long run it's going beneficial to the student, competitive, which have to stand in the international arena, competing and comparing themselves to other institutions, which we are bad at. I mean, none of the institutions are really come within the first 200 ranks world over, despite the fact that we are the largest population now. India has the highest population, and we have largest number of maximum. I mean, the number of institutions are too many, but our quality needs to improve. And for that, yes, I agree with you. There should be more budget. I don't know what happened to today's budget. I couldn't see if they are giving more budget to education or not, to health or not, and whether the budgetary provisions are increasing for these works or not. I'm sure if that happens, then I'm sure there will be better working environment. There will be more resources available to us, and we can be part of part of the as agents of change, as I said, rather than just become instructors.
Yes.
Any more questions?
Sir, actually, I have left another question in the chat box. I could not speak freely because there are some messages going on in my background. So please, sir, if you can read the question.
My problem is that I have lost that. That.
So I'll read it. I'll read it, sir.
Yeah, please.
So
please.
he wants to know,
Yeah.
in one of your slides titled Principles of Evaluation, you have mentioned about the importance of students' participation in the evaluation process. I am not very clear about this. So can you please explain again and give some real life example?
Okay.
Students' participation in the evaluation, sir. So I think maybe peer evaluation, probably peer evaluation, sir, probably.
There is one slide, sir, where you have titled that slide, and in the heading have kept the heading as principles of evaluation, sir. Maybe in that slide, sir.
This one, principles of evaluation. This one, evaluation needs to be authentic.
Especially point number 3, sir.
An active role. Yeah, evaluation must be a collaborative activity between teachers and students. Students must be able to assume an active role in evaluation, so they can begin to develop individual responsibilities for development and self-monitoring. That's what is the main purpose. That the evaluation cannot be completely teacher specific, that the way they want to evaluate. There can be a dialogue between teachers and students as to what are the areas which should be given more importance in evaluation, and the students can assume an active role in evaluation, and so that they know what exactly they are going to be evaluated on. Particularly, say a seminar or a project, they can say that we want project to be part of the evaluation, or we want seminars to be part of the evaluation. One can have a dialogue, not that they will actually evaluate themselves, but the teacher can always have a dialogue and give importance to the areas in which they want evaluations to be done. They can self-declaration, so that they develop that strength and self-monitoring, that whether they are able to do it or not. We have experienced that. They can say that we want this kind of test as a project should be. A teacher is not interested in a project, but they said we want to do a project. Let it be. Okay. You get me?
Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's a collaborative activity. Don't make it something which is imposed from above. Within the given structure that you have project work, you have practical work, you have interviews, you can have Viva Voce tests. Now, suppose the student says that we would like that to be introduced as part of the evaluation. Do it.
Okay, sir. Clear, sir. Now, got it. Thank you.
A variety of evaluation tools are important. Anything else? Can you read, Dr. Kwenda?
No, so there's only one, sir, in the chat box. Only this one.
Because I lost that, when
I know, sir, because only one screen, so many panels are there, no? So it becomes very difficult.
Yeah, I was trying to, and then I found that once I've lost it, I'm unable to get it back.
Hidden, I think, sir, you must have, hidden it.
That panel I'm not getting where I can read the.
You cross that format background. You can cross. There's a cross mark at the rightmost corner top.
This is an Apple laptop, and I'm not familiar with it. That is why all these problems.
I know, sir, and it can make us so nervous when we.
I'm not in my own ecosystem, no.
So
that helps
participants,
me. I'm fully versant with it.
So teachers, have you been benefited by sir's talk on assessment and evaluation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam.
Now I hope it's clear, what assessment and evaluation is all about, right? So
That was my main purpose, that one should know the clear difference between the two conceptually.
Earlier we thought giving mark is the evaluation, but right now only we understood that evaluation is some other different.
Yes, evaluation and assessments are fundamentally different in their application, but the objectives, the aims are the same, to improve the performance. Both do that.
It's more like evaluation is based on the assessment.
No,
It's not like that.
evaluation is a final judgment. Say,
Yes, based on the
suppose you are
assessment.
evaluating. Look, you are assessing my lecture, right? I'm
Yeah.
giving the lecture. You can stop me in between. Say that, sir, you are going too fast. Okay. Now this is not an evaluation. This is an assessment. But at the end of this lecture, you will be given a questionnaire from your course coordinator, Dr. Kwenda. She will say that please evaluate Dr. Naik's this lecture in a scale of say 1 to 10, and you give your evaluation that you may give me 6, or you may give me 5, or somebody may give me 9, and average will be taken out, and suppose I get 6.5. In terms of grade, it will be B plus or A. So Dr. Kwenda will say that Dr. Naik, who gave this lecture, he's evaluated as slightly above average. That means what she wanted me to be outstanding. But I couldn't reach that level as per your assessment. But I am close to it, above average. Maybe next time she would actually inform me that, sir, you got 6.6 on average, but our standard is that you must get 7.5 and above. So next lecture, I will be preparing better, more effective, so that the purpose is different. That here, the first one you assessed me saying that, sir, you are going too fast, or sir, you skipped many important issues which should have been discussed, but you did not. When you are saying that, you are actually assessing each part of my lecture and then giving me such feedback, which I would constantly improve. In the next lecture, I will be including those which you thought you pointed out as having not been discussed properly. I will include those, or I will dismiss it, saying that no, what you are saying is not right, and I'll give my reasons why I think that should not be included. Though those are assessment issues, but not evaluation. Evaluation is final. You give a verdict. You are a judge. You are a judge whether I have been able to reach that standard level of standard or not. So there you are becoming a judge.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for the clarification.
And your course code will be judging you at the end. There will be an
Yes,
examination.
yes. Yeah.
There will be some questions from this lecture, and you have to answer them. If you can't answer, then we will judge you and give a final certificate whether you have got. And you should get 10 out of 10. But if you don't answer well, that means you have not done well. So you get less than 10. So that's how the evaluation is done. Thank you.
Yes.
So I think there are no more questions.
So, ma'am, can we go for the vote of thanks?
Yes, Trideep, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce your name? Trideep or Trideep?
Trideep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I pronounce all wrong.
It's right, because it is a name. Okay, so it is a great pleasure for me to offer the vote of thanks to Professor D.K. Nayak for enlightening us on a holistic view, for giving us a holistic view of assessment and evaluation. And sir has also previously taught us about the academic writing and publishing in Scopus Journal or I think UGC Care List. So all those things which are very important to us. So please join me thanking sir for his all enlightening talks and his efforts and time. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to all of you and discussing various aspects. I'm sorry, speaking from this place and speaking from my department or from HR, these are two different things. Here I'm managing somehow with the minimum infrastructure and a computer which I don't handle. I don't even know how to handle it at this age. I don't want to know, so doesn't matter. But I did enjoy talking to you and the kind of questions, that evaluative questions that you asked, and that would help me in as an assessment for the next lecture on the same topic. I would see that those issues are taken care in a much better way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, and best wishes for your son, sir. Pray that he gets well soon, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So you can have a short tea break, participants. You can have a short tea break.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Okay, madam.
Okay, ma'am.
okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
So I'll stop sharing for you from here, sir. Let me
Okay.
try.
I'm
Stop.
trying to find out where I can stop.
I've stopped, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's okay, sir.
I'm leaving the
Okay, sir. Bye-bye. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. How was your conference, ma'am? I could not attend. I was too tied up.
Which one?
The one on the, I think you had it on the 16th, no, of January.
Just a moment. I'm
Yes.
not able to hear.
Okay, ma'am. The one you had on the 16th. Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. It was good.
So Gester could help you that time, ma'am?
Yeah, guest, he came in the beginning, and then because we needed somebody for the whole day till the program was going on, so he engaged one of his known persons,
Okay.
Marvin also.
Marvin, yes, yes.
So he was there. He did
So
it.
you're here in the department, ma'am? You're here?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay. So participants, are you back?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think it's better we start because it's already almost 3:10 now. Before we start the session, I would first like to introduce you to our resource person. Ma'am, we have 54 participations, and we have gradually started with a hybrid, but only 2 of our Shillong teachers, had joined us here in the HRDC center, but the rest are online. And again, there is a pan-India representation as well as different discipline. Participants, I take this opportunity to introduce you to Professor J.J. Mozika, who is a faculty of the Department of Law here at the Northeastern Hill University. And we have tried to chalk out on what important topic to, impart to our participants from the perspective of law. And according to our module, the gender has been given importance as well as, women. So I'm very happy that ma'am has always accepted our invitation to speak on a very important topic, the issues of security for us women teachers. But of course, ma'am is never biased. She always, bring in the issues that are related to our male teachers also. So we're really thankful to you, ma'am, for being part of a program and to share your knowledge on these issues. So I now hand over the session to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kharbuli. I'd like to share the screen with the PPT. So I'll just take a moment.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I hope it is visible.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible, but I think this is slide number 20, if I'm mistaken. Or is it 27?
23, ma'am.
23. Let me try again. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Now it's on slide number 1.
It's okay, no?
But it has not come on the slide mode. Probably you have to click that resume slideshow or something, which is visible in the screen. Resume slideshow. No, you move your cursor to the left, ma'am, to the left, a little bit more towards the left. My left, maybe your right.
Okay. And go to more.
Yeah, now try again, ma'am. The full.
I was doing.
Yeah, click on that one. No, it's still not coming. The full slideshow mode. Maybe you can stop share again, ma'am, and again start share. Hello. Yeah, now it's come. Now it's in full slide.
It's
Yes, it's moving, ma'am. It's moving.
okay. So, hello participants. As usual, the cameras are not on. Anyway, with the screen sharing, I won't be able to look at your faces also. So today we'll be discussing the law on sexual harassment at the workplace. As Dr. Khavli has already given my introduction, I am in the Department of Law, so I'll be speaking on this aspect from the legal perspective. So I don't think anybody is there having a law background amongst the participants. Is there anybody who is aware of the Sexual Harassment Act?
Ma'am, we have one from law background.
Okay.
From teaching in a law institution in Assam.
Okay. Okay.
Vinita, are you here, Vinita?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Can't hear you. Maybe there is a...
I think some problem with the screen again. Are you able to see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, it was visible, ma'am. It was visible. You'll have to open your presentation maybe once, ma'am, and then minimize. And then probably it will show on the screen. Yes.
It's showing, but not full screen. It's not full screen now.
No, not now. Click on slideshow, ma'am. Click on slideshow first. Slideshow. Oh, there, it's already on slideshow. Yes, yes.
Now, is it okay?
Participants, please respond to ma'am.
Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So we have one participant from having a law background. So it doesn't matter. This is something which is important and something about which all employees should know. As Dr. Khavli has said, it's not only from the angle of the female employees, but also from the angle of the male employees, that they should have some idea about this topic. Because since the law is there to protect women, like there is a kind of during earlier discussions, I have been speaking on this topic for a number of lectures I've given on this topic, and the male counterparts usually ask the question whether this kind of protection should be given to males also, and we'll come to that discussion a little later. Now, starting with the topic, since we are speaking about gender equality and gender issues, there are two aspects of gender equality. Under the Constitution, we have a right guaranteed to every one of us to work with dignity. And this right to work with dignity is a universally recognized human right. You can say it's a basic human right, without which you cannot enjoy your right to life. And that is one aspect of gender equality. The other aspect of the right to have gender equality is protection from sexual harassment at the workplace. Because until and unless you have some kind of security against sexual harassment at the workplace, you will not be able to give in your 100%. So, for example, if a woman it goes out to work and at the workplace she is being harassed by her boss or by some colleague, then that affects her mental state, and she is not able to contribute her full worth to the job or to the job requirements. So that is an aspect. One aspect is that we must have the right to work with dignity, and the second aspect is that which would include the right to work in an environment which is free from exploitation, free from sexual harassment. So now when we traverse the legal position in our country from the beginning, if we look at the Act, if you look at this slide, you will see that the Sexual Harassment Act was passed in the year 2013. Sorry. So that is just about 10 years ago. Or even not even 10 years, it has not even completed. Yeah, 10 years ago. So before that, we had some provisions in our constitution which try to guarantee gender equality to women, men and women equally. But those provisions were not directly aimed at protecting a woman from sexual harassment at the workplace. And that is why this case came up. This is a very landmark case, Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan, which came up before the Supreme Court in the year 1997. It is in this case that the Supreme Court for the first time discussed about the need for some directions or some laws for ensuring protection of women from sexual harassment at the workplace. And in fact, the Supreme Court laid down detailed guidelines to be followed by the employer. Yes.
Have you started moving your slides?
No, I'm still continuing with the first one.
Okay. So sorry to stop.
No problem, because I'm talking about the different provisions that we have under the law. So we have some provisions in the Constitution. As you see, there is one box in which I have mentioned about the Constitution. Then there is another box which mentions about Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan. This is the case decided by the Supreme Court, in which various guidelines were laid down by the Supreme Court. We'll come to the guidelines in the upcoming slides. So we'll discuss those later on. And then there was one provision in the IPC also, about which also we will discuss later on. But it was realized that all these provisions were not sufficient. And in fact, in Vishakha's case, the Supreme Court had directed the government to legislate or come up with a law on sexual harassment. So after how many years is it? Say about 16, 14, 97 and 13, about 17 years later, 16 or 17 years later, the parliament passed this act. So it was late, but nevertheless, it was a welcome step on the part of the government to come up with this act. So now we'll, in this discussion, we will be discussing about the provisions of the Constitution, which have been, I'm not talking about the provisions which are mentioned in the Constitution separately, because they have already been discussed in Vishakha's judgment. So we'll straight away come to Vishakha's judgment. This is a landmark case. The facts of the case were that there was a social worker in a village in Rajasthan, and this social organization, the NGO, was involved in prevention of child marriages. So when this social worker went to the site where child marriage was going to be held, to take steps to avoid the marriage, to prevent the marriage from taking place. The members of the family who were having this, who was organizing this marriage, they were not happy with the obstruction created by the social worker, and the father and some other relatives of the
Excuse me, ma'am. I think your slide is not moving. To us, it's not moving.
Can you not see Vishakha's judgment, 1997?
No, ma'am, it's the
Oh, ma'am, it's not moving.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
first slide.
Then
Still on the
let-
first page.
Okay, then let me continue with the
Ma'am, you can
this
stop.
format.
Sharing. You can stop sharing and then start sharing again.
Okay, are you able to see now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Shall
Yes,
I
ma'am, yes,
continue
ma'am.
with this if it is visible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, so yeah, let's continue like this rather than the full screen. Full
Okay.
screen is creating a problem.
All right. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So I was talking about Vishakha's judgment. In this case, there was a social worker who was trying to prevent a child marriage from occurring, and that was not taken very positively by the family members. And in the argument, there was an argument, and later on, at the end of the day, this social worker, the lady, was gang raped by some members who were involved in the marriage. So this issue came up to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court found that there was no law in the country trying to take care of sexual harassment. So protection of women against sexual harassment was not provided under the law directly under any of the provisions. So the Supreme Court said that, but still we cannot, since we have certain rights guaranteed to women, we cannot allow a woman's right to go unredressed. And that is why the Supreme Court referred to some of the international provisions and employed the international provisions like the UDHR and that is Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and particularly the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Most of you must have heard about this. This is called CEDAW, Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. This was a convention which was passed in 1979. So these international provisions, all these provisions, they guarantee a woman protection from sexual harassment. So those provisions were employed by the Supreme Court to provide relief to this woman who was gang raped. And the Supreme Court referred to the constitutional provisions like Article 14 and 15, which guarantee the right to equality. Then Article 21, which gives every person a right to life and personal liberty, which includes the right to live with dignity, because you cannot enjoy your right and personal liberty until and unless you have the right to live with dignity. So that is very important. And also Article 19(1)(g) was referred to. Article 19(1)(g) gives the freedom to every citizen to practice any trade, profession, occupation, business. And that also cannot be enjoyed until and unless you have a safe working environment. So these provisions of the Constitution were referred to in Vishakha's judgment. And since there was no law, the Supreme Court said that as long as the Parliament does not come up with a law, we will lay down certain guidelines, and those guidelines will form the law. So the Supreme Court laid down certain guidelines. Now here we are coming to the guidelines. Mainly the emphasis is on the duty of the employer. So the Supreme Court said that the employer must take steps to prevent and prohibit the acts of sexual harassment in the workplace. because Article 21, which talks about the right to life, means that you can only live with dignity, and that dignity would include an environment which is free from sexual harassment. And another duty was cast upon the employer to ensure that if there is an incident of sexual harassment at the workplace, the employer must take steps to resolve the complaints. So the grievances must be resolved by the employer. And for that purpose, a framework was laid down in the Act. So every employer was asked to constitute an internal complaints committee. A committee would be required to be constituted by every employer, and that committee would be entrusted with the job of making the inquiry whether there was actually an incident of sexual harassment or not, and if the guilt of the person who is responsible for sexual harassment is proved, then the committee could recommend punishment to him. What kind of punishment should be given to him, that could be recommended by the committee. Those recommendations would have to be considered by the employer, and accordingly the punishments would be meted out to the perpetrator of the sexual harassment. And the Supreme Court said that until and unless the Parliament comes up with a law, those guidelines will be considered as the law. So that is why from 1997 till 2013, the Vishakha guidelines were the guidelines for dealing with such cases of sexual harassment. Okay. Now, after that, in 2009, before that, I'll mention a few more cases which were quite important. There is one case, Apparel Export Promotion Council versus AK Chopra, where there was a private secretary to the boss who was asked to travel with the boss, and then she was molested in privacy. So unnecessarily she was detained at work and then molested. So in that case also the Supreme Court followed the Vishakha guidelines to give relief to that lady. Then that was a case of 1999. Then in Vishakha's case, the court had given a direction to the government to come up with the law, but then the Parliament was delaying for whatever reason. It was delaying the process of enacting the law. And then there were some states, some employers and some states who were not applying the Vishakha guidelines in matters of sexual harassment. So again, another writ petition was filed in the Delhi High Court, which went up to the Supreme Court. The name of that case was Madhulimai Lele. And in that case, it was observed by the court that there were violations of the Vishakha guidelines in many of the states, and so more pressure was put on the government to come up with the law. So in response to that, the Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013 was passed. Now, as you see in the title of the Act, this Act talks about prevention, prohibition, and redressal. So steps must be taken, first of all, to prevent the offense from occurring at all. And in case it cannot be prevented, then at least there should be some kind of protection available. And finally, if the incident occurs, then there should be a mechanism to give some kind of redressal to the victim. Now, as you see in the graphic, in the figure, there is a figure of a male and with a question, what about me? So in the beginning, we were talking about the rights of males. There may be situations where even males may be harassed by the female bosses. So the male participants, would you react to that? If you have anything to share, any opinion to give on this? Because as I said, as the name of this act states, the sexual harassment of women at workplace. It's a specific legislation aimed at protecting women. It does not cover male employees. So would any of the male employees react to this? Male participants? Can there be an incident of sexual harassment against male employees?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, but this act does not take care of that. And I'll give you the reason for that. The reason is that in our country, like we are a male dominating country, where like in American Western countries, you may find women bosses, female bosses. But in India, you'll hardly find female bosses at the helm of affairs. There are like certain circumstances in metropolitan cities, you might find some females at the top in the businesses and all that. But then the general trend is not like that. So when this act was going to be passed, suggestions were invited from the people, and the stakeholders gave a suggestion that males should also be covered under this act. But then this was not considered by the Ministry of Child and Women Empowerment was drafting this bill. So the reason being that we are a male dominant society, and then women are considered as a vulnerable section in our country. So this is a social legislation which is mainly aimed at protection of women, providing special measures for the protection of women. So now we come to some of the provisions of the Act. The first thing that we will discuss is about the definition of sexual harassment. Now, if I don't know whether you can download the Act from the website and go through this Act. In the meantime, just briefly, I will let you know. Now, before we come to the definition of sexual harassment, I will also tell you that there are about 30 sections. There are 30 sections in this Act. And this Act is also supplemented by rules. The rules, the sexual harassment, the sexual harassment of women at workplace, prevention, prohibition, and redressal rules. That is also of 2013. So these rules also contain detailed provisions about how the provisions will be given effect to. So 14 rules are mentioned in the rules, and we have 30 sections in the Act. You can download the Act as well as the rules and have a look if you are interested in knowing more about this law. So now we come to the definition of sexual harassment. According to the definition which is given under the Act, sexual harassment includes these things. First of all, physical contact and advances. It can be either one of these, or it can be a combination also. So the things which are mentioned over here is physical contact and advances, then a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, or any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. So all these Any one or more of these acts or behavior can be considered as sexual harassment. Okay. In the act itself, we also have an explanation about which tries to explain how sexual harassment can be manifested. So sexual harassment can be manifested in different forms. It can be verbal, it can be non-verbal, it can be physical. So verbal, which would include sexual innuendos and other suggestive comments, that is by word of mouth if you are mentioning something which has the effect of, has a sexual implication. Non-verbal would include gestures, sounds, and offensive written material. Physical would include intentional touching of the body or inappropriate display of the body. So now, what kind of conduct may be considered as sexual harassment? That will depend upon how the victim takes it, how the victim considers it. If from the angle of the victim, that conduct is unwelcome, then it will be considered as sexual harassment. Otherwise, it may not be. If you feel that it's not unwelcome, suppose, for example, if one of your colleagues invites you for a cinema, for a movie, and if you are on good terms with the person, you may not have any kind of issue about that. You may go for a movie with that person. But if you have an issue and you feel that no, it's not acceptable to me, then it will amount to sexual harassment. So it depends upon how the victim takes it. Is it a welcome gesture or is it an unwelcome gesture? If it is unwelcome, then it will be considered as sexual harassment. Now, again, in the act, there is a mention about these certain circumstances which may be considered as sexual harassment. So, for example, if there is an implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in employment, so if the boss says that if you agree to my sexual advance, then you will get some good treatment in your employment. Or if you don't accept my advance, then I will punish you for that. There will be a detrimental treatment in your employment. So these are instances which are mentioned in the act itself: implied or explicit promise of preferential treatment in employment, implied or explicit threat of detrimental treatment in employment, implied or explicit threat about present or future employment status, then interference with work or creating an intimidating or hostile environment, humiliating treatment likely to affect health or safety. So if a hostile environment is created, that means an environment where she is not allowed to work properly, that would also amount to sexual harassment. If there is a threat about her job, that if you do not agree, then you will lose your job. So that kind of threat would also be included as sexual harassment. It would amount to sexual harassment. And if she is humiliated in front of others, the humiliation is such that that affects her health or her safety, her mental safety. So that would also amount to sexual harassment. Then the next important definition is who is an employer? Who is an employee? Who would be protected under this act? So the aim of the act is to include as many employees, categories of employees as possible. It's not necessary that you must be in a regular employment, in a full-time employment. You can be in a part-time employment. You can be a contractual worker, or you can just be an intern. When we talk about educational institutions or some other institutions where apprenticeship or internship is a feature, there those interns would also be protected. So the act is very broad based. It tries to include as many categories of victims as possible. So regular, temporary, ad hoc, or on daily wage basis, these employees are also protected. Then the employees may be engaged directly by the employer or through an agent or a contractor. So it's not necessary that you should be employed by the employer directly. Even if the employer engages an agent to engage you, that would also be covered. It's not necessary that remuneration must be there for the purpose of getting protection under this act. So the engagement may be with or without remuneration. It can be voluntary also. And the terms of the employment may be expressed or implied. It also includes a co-worker. So if your colleague is responsible for the sexual harassment, you can file a complaint against him also. It's not necessary that you can only file a complaint against the employer. You can also file a complaint against a co-worker or a contract worker. A probationer is also protected. A trainee is also protected. An apprentice is also protected. So, for example, medical students, they have to intern. Even law students have to intern. So when they intern, they can complain against acts of sexual harassment against them. Now coming to the meaning of employer. Now, in case of the head of the department or organization, the person who is responsible for the management, supervision, and control. So head of the department or organization, when you suppose we are talking about the government organization or central government organization or a state government organization, in that case, the head of the department or the organization would be considered as the employer. Then in some kinds of organizations, you may require a person who is responsible for managing that organization or supervising. For example, in a factory or in some other companies, you may have a board of directors or an individual person who is responsible for supervising or controlling that organization. So in that case, the person who is responsible for the management, supervision, and control of that organization would be considered as the employer. Now, it is very interesting to know that this act has also given protection to domestic workers. So domestic workers who are engaged in the households, they are also protected. And in their case, it is the person who or the household who employs the domestic worker who is considered as the employer. So these are the persons who are considered as the employers in different categories. So if you have a government organization, it is the head of the department. In case of other institutions where you have a board, then the person who is responsible for the management, supervision, and control. And in case of domestic workers, the person who engages the domestic worker or the household which engages where she is working. Now, what is the workplace? The definition of workplace is also very wide under this act. So the aim has been to include as many organizations as possible. So first of all, we have government-owned or controlled establishments. Then we have private sector organizations, hospitals, nursing homes, they are covered, sports institutes, stadiums, training institutes, vocational or educational institutions. Then for the domestic worker, it is the dwelling place where she works. And there is also a concept of extended workplace. Extended workplace. Now, in the course of your job, if you are required to go somewhere, and that is for the purpose of the employment, in the course of the employment, then that place would also be included as your workplace. And it also includes the transportation facility that is provided by the employer. So any place which is visited by the employee arising out of or during the course of employment, including transportation provided by the employer. So suppose I'll just give you an example of an employee, just an imaginary employee working in Nehu. Suppose he stays in the city and he commutes to his workplace by the university bus or by a pool car, which is provided by the university, and there is an act of sexual harassment during the travel commutation period in the vehicle which is provided by the university, then that would also be covered under this act. Or suppose an employee has to go and attend a meeting somewhere outside, and at that place there is an act of sexual harassment. That would also, for that act of sexual harassment also, the employee can complain to the employer here in Nehu. So remedy would have to be provided by the Nehu authorities. So if a place is visited, it must be in the course of employment or because of the employment. If you go on a holiday, then and you are sexually harassed at some other place, then that would not be covered. So you have to remember that it should be in connection with your employment. Now, under this was also a provision which was a guideline which was laid down in the Vishaka's case, and it has been included in that. There is a provision, a direction for establishment of an internal complaints committee, and for those organizations which employ 10 or more employees, it is mandatory to have an ICC. So all those organizations which have 10 or more employees, they must establish the internal complaints committee. This is to be appointed by an order in writing. Usually it is expected that the constitution of the ICC will be notified on the website of the organization. Usually it is there also in most of the organizations. Then at least half of the members of the ICC have to be women. They must be women. So majority of the members must be women. And we'll skip this. This is the constitution of the ICC. Who will be the members of the ICC? First of all, there must be a presiding officer who is a senior woman employee from the workplace or other administrative units, office or organization. So if the workplace does not have a woman employee, then the woman employee can be taken from some other administrative units of that organization also. So the presiding officer, the chairperson, is a senior woman employee. Then there are not less than 2 members who are committed to the cause of women, or who have experience in social work, or who have legal knowledge. So out of these 3 categories, at least 2 members must be there, and 1 member from an NGO or an association which is familiar with issues relating to sexual harassment. So 2 plus 1 and 1. Minimum 4 members must be there in the ICC. Now, an ICC is required to be set up in all those organizations who have more than 10 employees, 10 or more than 10 employees. But what about those organizations which have less than 10 employees? For them, the Act envisages local complaints committee. So local complaints committee is required to be set up in every district And this local complaints committee takes up the complaints or deals with the complaints received from the organizations where there are less than 10 employees. That is, they don't have an ICC. So those organizations which have not set up an ICC, the victims can complain to the LCC. And also the domestic workers, they can also complain to the LCC because they will also not have any organization where there will be an ICC. So local complaints committee takes care of these complainants. Now coming to the grievance redressal process. Now the Act says that after the incident of sexual harassment has occurred, within a period of 3 months, the complaint must be made to the ICC or to the LCC as the case may be. Now there is a provision for condonation of delay. So if for some reason the victim is not in a position to complain within the period of 3 months, then that may be allowed, an extension may be allowed by the ICC or the LCC as the case may be. But while allowing the permission to accept the complaint even after 3 months, the reasons for the delay must be recorded. And the maximum period up to which the delay can be condoned is 3 more months. So maximum 3 plus 3, 6 months. So beyond that, you cannot complain to the ICC or the LCC. Now, after the complaint is received, the first step that the ICC will try to take is to see whether there is any scope for settlement. If there is any scope for reconciliation between the complainant and the person against whom the complaint has been made. Usually there will not be. It's very obvious that when a woman has complained, something might have happened, and then she will not easily withdraw. And the condition for even if a settlement is reached, it is stated in the Act that there cannot be any monetary consideration for withdrawal of the complaint. So it's not that you make a complaint and tomorrow you take some compensation, some money from the person against whom you have complained and then you settle the dispute. This is not allowed at all under this Act. So monetary settlement cannot be there. If there is a settlement, then the ICC will record the settlement and the copy of that settlement agreement will be forwarded to the employer or to the district officer as the case may be, and to the parties. So both the parties will receive a copy of the settlement. And after that, there is no need for further inquiry. But if the settlement is not reached, then the ICC or the LCC will proceed with the inquiry. Now coming to the process of the inquiry, during the inquiry, the principles of natural justice have to be followed. Now, some of you may not know what the principles of natural justice are. Basically, an opportunity to be heard must be given to the other party. So both the parties, like you cannot just make a complaint and then one fine morning, the person against whom you have made the complaint receives a notice, receives a termination order or a suspension order. He must also be given a reasonable opportunity of being heard. His side of the story must also be heard. So the principles of natural justice basically mean that sufficient notice of the charges which are leveled against him must be given to him, and he must be given a chance, he must be given an opportunity to present his side of the story. So the principles of natural justice are required to be followed during the inquiry. Now, after the inquiry is completed, usually there is no time limit specifically mentioned in the Act, but there are some Supreme Court decisions which say that usually it should be completed within 3 months. And if there are reasons for which the inquiry cannot be completed within 3 months, a maximum period of 6 months can be given. So that is not mentioned in the Act. That is through some of the Supreme Court decisions. Now, once the inquiry is complete, the report has to be submitted to the employer and also to the parties. Now, when in the inquiry report, if it is stated that no action is to be taken, for example, in some cases, it might be impossible for the inquiry committee to really get any evidence. And in most of the cases, you will find that such acts are such that you will not get witnesses. Acts of sexual harassment will not be committed in front of everyone. So sometimes the charges which are leveled may not be proved. Or it can also happen that there is no substance in the charges. So in that case, the inquiry committee can recommend to the employer that no action is required to be taken. And in that case, it will also be tried to determine whether the charges were false or malicious. Now, one very interesting provision under the Act is that if a woman makes false allegations, false charges, then there is a provision for punishment. So if there are false or malicious charges, then action can be taken against the complainant also. Because in some cases, it may happen that unnecessarily there is some kind of harassment of the person against whom the complaint is made. So in that case, there is a check on such kind of false charges, and action can be taken against the woman who makes the complaint. But if the charges are proved, then the ICC can recommend punishment as per the service rules. Now, in case of government service, we all have our service rules, according to which different, the method of inquiry is also mentioned, how disciplinary action can be taken against a person. So all the service rules provide the provisions for that. So those provisions will be followed in conducting this inquiry also. And the punishments which can be awarded, that is also mentioned in the service rules. So a person may be just asked to give a written apology, or a warning may be given to the person, or there can be a provision of reprimand or censure. There can be a punishment of withholding of promotion, or withholding of increments, or a pay rise, or in serious matters, serious situations, it can also be termination from the job. So these are the different kinds of punishments which may be recommended by the ICC, and then the employer can take action accordingly. Now, there is also a provision of payment of monetary penalty to the aggrieved woman. This is for the harassment, the trauma, and the physical and mental harassment that she has had to undergo. So for that, monetary penalty can also be awarded to be paid to her. And here it is to be noted that it's not, the liability of monetary penalty is not on the employer. This will be recovered from the person who is responsible for the sexual harassment. So the employee, if he is responsible for the act, a co-worker is responsible, then the co-worker will be made to pay this penalty to the aggrieved woman. Against the order of punishment, both the parties, if they are not happy with the punishment, they can appeal. So there is a provision of appeal under the Act. If the woman is not happy with the amount of punishment given, or if the man is not happy with the kind of punishment given to him, then both of them are free to appeal against the order of the ICC. Then there is a provision for interim reliefs during the pendency, as when the inquiry is going on. If the aggrieved woman so asks, she can be transferred from one workplace to another workplace, because it may not be possible for her to work in that same place where she has been harassed. So it will become impossible for him to be in the same place, face him every day, each and every day. So she can request the employer to transfer her or the respondent to some other workplace. And she can also ask for leave up to a period of 3 months. So it's upon the employer to grant leave to the aggrieved woman up to a period of 3 months. This is the maximum period of leave that can be granted to her. Now, as I said, monetary compensation or monetary relief can also be given to her. Now, how would the court determine how much monetary relief should be given to her? So for the determination of the compensation, all these things will be taken into consideration. How much mental trauma she has undergone, the mental trauma, pain, suffering, emotional distress which has been caused to her, then the loss in career opportunity due to the incident, because if a serious incident happens, then that may traumatize her so much that it may affect her mental well-being and her full well-being to such an extent that she may have lost in her job. So if that happens, then how much loss she has suffered in her career, that will also be taken into consideration. Then the medical expenses which have been incurred by her, what is the financial status of the respondent, what is the income of the respondent, that will also be taken into consideration, and whether the payment can be made at one go or in installments. So that will also be taken into consideration in determining the amount of compensation and how that compensation is to be paid. Now, we have already talked about the employer's obligations which were laid down in Vishakha's case. Here we'll find that a detailed list of obligations is laid down in the Act. First of all, it states that the employer is responsible for providing a safe working environment and to display at the workplace. Actually, it's a requirement that every employer must display at the workplace that acts of sexual harassment will not be tolerated. And if such acts occur, then there will be penal consequences for that. So the penal consequences of indulging in acts of sexual harassment, that must be displayed at the workplace at conspicuous places. Then composition of the ICC, who are the members of the ICC, that must be made known publicly in the workplace. And what is the mechanism to get redressal if a person suffers sexual harassment? So the grievance redressal mechanism, how, within what time she has to make the complaint, to whom she has to make the complaint, and what happens after that. The procedural aspect must also be made known to the aggrieved employees. Apart from that, the employer is also expected to organize workshops and awareness programs for sensitizing employees and organize orientation programs for the members of the ICC. Now, sometimes it may happen that the ICC members are not like legal persons. They also may not be aware about the process of grievance redressal and all that. So it's necessary that they should also be sensitized and oriented about the process of giving relief to victims of sexual harassment. So that is also very necessary. then the employer is also expected to cooperate with the ICC during the course of the inquiry. So whatever kind of assistance is required by the ICC at the time of inquiry, that must be provided by the employer. Then sexual harassment must be treated as misconduct under the service rules. So under the service rules, if a person is guilty of any kind of misconduct, then he is proceeded against under the service rules, and he is a disciplinary inquiry follows. So sexual harassment is also to be considered as misconduct under the service rules, and if he is found guilty, then he must be punished as per the service rules. Then in case the aggrieved employee, the woman, she wants to file a police complaint, in that case, she should be provided assistance by the employer. So, and then also for the purpose of initiating action against under the IPC or some other law, because under the Sexual Harassment Act, the woman, the person who is responsible for the act of sexual harassment will only be dealt with under the service law, under the service rules. So he can lose his job, he may be asked to pay compensation, but he cannot be put behind bars. If the victim wants the person to be put behind bars, then she has to make a complaint under the IPC. So if that is required to be done, in that case, the employer should also assist the employee, the victim, in initiating action under the IPC. So if there is a criminal contempt, then the person can also go behind bars. He can be imprisoned. He can be given a sentence. And the employer should also ensure timely submission of reports to the district officer. Now, these are the penalties which are imposed on the employer. So if the employer fails to constitute an ICC, or if the employer contravenes any of the provisions under the Act, then a fine of 50,000 will be levied. And in case of private enterprises, there can be a cancellation of business licenses also. And all the offences under this Act are non-cognizable. Now, non-cognizable means that the person cannot be arrested without a warrant. So if you want the person to be arrested, you will have to proceed under the IPC. Okay, so now we'll move on to the Indian Penal Code provision. This is a provision which existed in the IPC since long, but if you see, it's not directly dealing with the offense of sexual harassment. The section reads like this, section 509 of the IPC, it reads like this: word, gesture or act intended to insult the modesty of a woman. So it was only this thing which was covered under the IPC before the 2013 amendment of the IPC. Now in 2013, there was an amendment by which the offense of sexual harassment was also created. We are coming to that in the next slide. So before that, there was no provision directly dealing with sexual harassment. It was only word, gesture or act intended to insult the modesty of a woman. So whoever, under this Act, whoever intending to insult the modesty of a woman uttered any word, made any sound or gesture, or exhibited any object intending that such word or sound should be heard, or that the gesture or object should be seen, or intrudes upon the privacy of such woman, he was punishable with simple imprisonment for a term which may extend to 3 years or fine. So the punishment prescribed under this provision was simple imprisonment up to 3 years or fine. But this was a cognizable offense. That is, if a complaint was made under Section 509, the person responsible, the person against whom the complaint was made, could be arrested even without a warrant. Then we have the amendment to the IPC provision in 2013. Now, it was in 2013, after the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 2013, that this provision was introduced in the IPC, and a new section was added to the IPC, Section 354A. This, for the first time, talked about sexual harassment as an offense under the IPC. So the title of this section is Sexual Harassment and Punishment for Sexual Harassment. So here, a man committing any of the following acts: physical contact and advances involving unwelcome and explicit sexual overtures, or a demand or request for sexual favors, or showing pornography against the will of a woman, or making sexually colored remarks, shall be guilty of the offense of sexual harassment. So under Section 354A, a man guilty of any of these acts would be guilty of sexual harassment. Now, the punishment prescribed over here is for the offense under clause 1, 2, and 3. That is, these three: physical contact and advances, then a demand or request for sexual favors, or for showing pornography. It was punishable with rigorous imprisonment for a term of up to 3 years and/or fine. Then for the fourth one, making sexually colored remarks, it was punishable with imprisonment for a term up to 1 year and/or fine. So if you analyze these 4 clauses, you will find that the first 3 are considered to be serious in nature, where the punishment is rigorous imprisonment, which may extend up to 3 years, and it would also include fine. But the last one was considered less serious, making sexually colored remarks, that is punishable only with imprisonment for a term of up to 1 year. So the maximum period is 1 year over here, and it could also include fine. The nature of the offense is cognizable. That means a person against whom the complaint is made under Section 354A can be arrested even without a warrant. Now we come to an analysis, a brief summary, you can say, of the Act. As we talked in the beginning, there is no protection for male employees under this Act, and the reasons we have already discussed. It provides for the constitution of ICC, Internal Complaints Committee for different offices. Then, this point is something which I missed. When the inquiry goes on in the ICC, within the ICC, none of the parties can bring their advocates to represent them. So legal representation is not allowed within the ICC. When you go to the court on appeal, then you can engage your lawyers, but not within the ICC. So it's because even in the ICC, the members are not necessarily judicial members. So there is no legal representation permissible within the ICC. Then there is a criticism saying that the timelines which are mentioned under the Act may be unrealistic. Maybe in some cases you need more time. It may not be possible to complete the inquiry within the time, or it may not be possible to make the complaint within the time which is prescribed under the Act. So timelines may be unrealistic. Now, the provision of the punishment for false and malicious complaints, that is something you can say it's a good point in that, because that tries to deter a person, an employee, from making any false complaint. So if there is an action for false or malicious complaints, then a person will think twice or thrice before making a false complaint, a frivolous complaint. Then the employer also has the ability to deduct the monetary compensation from the salary of the harasser. So if the monetary compensation is allowed, is granted to the victim, and the person who is supposed to pay is not paying it, then the employer can deduct that amount from his salary. And there is no monetary liability on the part of the employer. The liability is of the person who is responsible for the act of sexual harassment. And this act only deals with harassment, sexual harassment. It does not deal with other forms of harassment. So this is also one thing that must be remembered, that other forms of harassment at the workplace, you cannot complain. For other kinds of harassment, you cannot complain. Suppose you are being overloaded with work, or there is some other kind of harassment. In that case, you cannot complain or make a complaint to the ICC under this act. There is no relief. I'm coming to the end of it now, and then we can invite some discussion, some questions if you have. Just wanted to bring to the notice of the young teachers, female teachers specifically, who can also pass on the message to their students that now sometimes you may feel reluctant or hesitant to make a complaint to the ICC directly, or you do not have such an ICC in your organization. In that case, you can make a direct complaint to the Ministry of Women and Child Development through this portal. It's called the SheBox. So SheBox online complaint management system. If you go to the website of Ministry of Women and Child Development, you'll find this. You can register your complaint here. The ministry will direct the complaint to the person, to the concerned person who would take action on your complaint. So suppose a student of NEHU wants to make a complaint, but is reluctant to come before the ICC. She can also make this online complaint here at the SheBox, and then the SheBox will revert it back to the ICC in NEHU, and then they would take the necessary action. And the complainant can also view the status of the complaint. What is the position of the complaint on a day-to-day basis? So this is one thing which some people do not know, which about which you can pass on the message to your students or your colleagues. Okay, so that is all. If you have any questions now, any discussions, that I would invite that now. Anybody would like to share anything or ask for clarifications?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, I have a question. I'm Shamin Pereira from Goa University. Ma'am, I just wanted to know, when you said that this, types of like maybe the advancements, or I'm not talking about that, but maybe a remark. Okay, a remark from a male, male colleague that is not accepted. Okay, that is not a good statement. So, in case if that is uttered, okay, and we feel that it is under, like, the I feel that it is a kind of not a good remark, it's kind of harassment. So consider I approach the ICC committee. So I mean, like, because it's just a remark that is said once, maybe there was no one around. So how do I mean, like, in what way would this case go through towards, like, I mean, because there is no one else who heard it.
Yeah. See, I'll share some of few of my personal experiences in this.
Yes, ma'am.
Like, the main objective is that you should not be harassed, isn't it?
Right.
And at this stage, we are equally, like, empowered. We know about our rights. We know what is good behavior, what is bad conduct, and all that. Now, rather than like, this is my personal feeling that suppose you're talking about a remark made by a colleague or maybe by a boss, which is not palatable to you. So just retort at that moment itself. I think that is the best thing, that you just make him realize that this is not acceptable.
Okay.
And that is, and if that is not acceptable, like he does not bow down, he does not accept his mistake, then you'll have to go take the next step maybe. So I'll speak about some of my experiences. Like, I don't want to go into exact like naming persons or anything, but there was an incident when one of my colleagues said, I was having a problem with my vehicle, and said, and I had to take that was a very long ago when I was a young teacher. So I had to take a local cab or something to come to work. Then my colleague who was staying, who was in my neighborhood, not very far, but said, why, ma'am, why didn't you let me know? You could have come with me. I would be happy to take, like give you a lift on my bike. So, and I used to drive a car at that time. So naturally, like it was not acceptable to me that I'll be coming, taking a lift from him, behind him. So I said, don't say that. You have told this in front of me. Don't say this in front of my husband. So at that day, he realized that, no, this is something which I cannot play with this lady. So make the person realize. Then there was another occasion where a letter was given to another like person in a position, and then we were having a meeting. The person says that now we've received another love letter from Dr. Mosika. So it was not acceptable to me. And the next day I did not retort at that moment itself. Now, did you get my point? We have received another love letter from Dr.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Mosika. So maybe his intention was not that, but the way he said it, it was not acceptable to me. And I realized after going home that if I let it happen again, like if I don't give a response to this, it might happen again tomorrow, day after. So this kind of behavior will continue. In the evening, I wrote a letter responding to his words. And then he said sorry. And that was not my intention. And after that, it has not happened. But these are small things which, if we allow to happen, may continue to happen and may take like odd shapes later on. But then if we stop them, nip them in the bud, then we can take control. And in the ICC, suppose you have to complain to the ICC. Since it's only a remark, if the notice goes to the person, I think that will become a lesson for the person. The notice goes, he's called to give an explanation. That itself will be one step which will stop him. So sometimes when these kinds of like informal or even formal response at the initial stage do not work, then you might have to complain to the ICC. But then the third step is that when ICC gives him a notice to come and like answer for the complaint, that also becomes a deterrent. That is one stage. But if it is a serious matter, then maybe the inquiry continues. And so it can be a simple apology or something like that, which he will render at that moment. But serious cases, of course, will have to be inquired into, and then they'll have to follow the course.
Ma'am, right. But then the person would give an apology only if he accepts it. But what if the person is not willing to accept, saying that I never said it? So in that case?
In that case, you should proceed. You should proceed with your action against him in the inquiry, like let the inquiry continue. Because you say it has happened and he is denying it. He cannot deny
Okay.
it if it has happened. If he is denying it, you go on. Let him prove that he has not said it.
Okay, ma'am. Right. But then, ma'am, there can be instances wherein this could even be misused, right? Wherein if I
Yeah.
just want to put someone in trouble, and
Yeah,
the
that is-
person has not even, just to create a.
Yeah, for that, I think section 14, section 14 of the Act talks about the punishment for false or malicious complaints. If you give
Right,
false
so-
evidence, or suppose you just create evidence, you tell your friend to fabricate evidence, you say that, yes, I heard him saying like this. So, and it is proved ultimately that it is fabricated evidence. In that case, you will be punished. The employer
Right.
will take action against you according to the service rules applicable to you.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, there are
Yes.
some questions in the chat box.
Let me see.
Quite a number of questions in the chat box.
Seeing the attendances. Session 4. And should have gone down up. Is the role of women cell and ICC different details? What is the role and function of the women cell? Okay, actually, before the ICC came into being, this act was passed. Every institution, most of the institutions, they used to have a women's cell. So in NEHU also we had a women's cell. And after ICC, this act was passed, the terminology was changed. The women's cell itself became the internal complaints committee. There was a little change in the role and the function. Women's cell, the constitution of the women's cell was much wider. When we had the women's cell in the university, the constitution included representatives from the teaching community, from the non-teaching community, as well as from the student community, in addition to the NGOs, social activists, legal advisor, and also the DSW was a member in the women's cell. So the constitution was quite wide, trying to give representation to the various stakeholders, teaching, non-teaching, as well as student community. So that was the constitution, the difference in the constitution. Now in under the act, the ICC's constitution is specified, but of course the university or any other organization is free to increase the number of members in the ICC also. The minimum number of members is prescribed in the act. You must have a presiding officer, you must have 2 persons representing the organizations which are dealing with women's rights, or who are dealing with who have knowledge of legal rights, and a person who is familiar with issues of sexual harassment. So that is the minimum which is prescribed under the act. Otherwise, the role is the same. They also conduct inquiry or take into, they deal with, undertake inquiries into complaints of sexual harassment. And that was also the role of the women's cell. So it's only after the passing of the act that the terminology of the cell has changed to ICC. Then defamation. Regarding this question, defamation with respect to harassment at workplace, Vinita, can you clarify whether you want to know about defamation of the woman or the defamation of the person against whom who is the responsible for the sexual harassment?
Ma'am, I'm asking about the victim, somebody who is victimized. Am I
Pardon?
audible? I'm asking you about the victim, ma'am, somebody who is the victim of the oppression or harassment.
See, she can proceed. She can proceed under the IPC. So if she wants, she feels that she has been defamed. But actually, when a person has complained and her complaint is listened to, she is given redressal. That means that, like, who will feel aggrieved about defamation? When you win the case, when you win your complaint, then you are not concerned about what other people think, because people will know that he was the wrongdoer. Don't you think that? Suppose a person A was sexually harassed and then she complains and she wins after the inquiry, the person against whom she has complained is punished. Is she concerned about what other people? Now she should not be concerned about that. People should see the fate of the complaint. Even then, if she feels she's free to make a criminal contempt under either the IPC or even in the civil court if she wants some compensation. If she wants the victim to go behind bars, she can proceed against him under the IPC. If she wants to receive some monetary compensation, she can go against under the civil law. We have tort law under which she can claim compensation for defamation. You have law background, so you also have idea about tort law, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Vinita? So if you want money, some compensation, you can proceed under the tort law. Yeah, how can one be prove that she has been harassed at workplace or in the college? Now, for this, this is a practical thing, and the procedure usually is that you have to bring in your witnesses or some evidences in support. Some direct or indirect. It's not like nowadays you find that even through WhatsApp messages or some other like telephonic conversations or some video callings, you can have such kind of harassments. So you can just collate all those and try to bring them. You can have your friends seeing you being harassed. So you can bring them in as witnesses at the time of inquiry. So when you make your complaint, you have to give the list of witnesses, the persons like on whom you will be relying to prove your case. So all those, actually the inquiry committee will let you know when you make the complaint that you are supposed to give your list of witnesses on whose evidence you will be relying at the time of the inquiry.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
And then there is one question regarding, can there be a case between a student and a teacher? Yes, of course, why not? And usually it happens between professors and research scholars. This is a usual thing. So, because research scholars are also ambitious and some teachers, I don't know, there is perversion. It may not be general, but some perversions are there in every section of the society. So taking advantage, undue advantage, that is always there. So basically case can be there between a student and a teacher, no doubt about it. And many cases in Niku have also happened between students and teachers. Okay, so that's all I think.
So participants, I think there are no more questions from your side. So, Sir Mintu, are you there?
Yes, yes, ma'am. I am here.
Yes, please.
Good evening to all. It's my privilege to present a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of UGC HRDC NEHU and all the participants of this 11th FIP program, extend vote of thanks to Professor Jyoti Majik for presenting a wonderful presentation on the topic Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace. She has explained us about the Vishaka Judgment 1997, then varied forms of sexual harassment, then Constitution of ICC, and she has also explained about the IPC provisions and many more. So I think we will be highly benefited from her presentation. Thanking you, ma'am, once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bintu. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Most welcome. Thank you. Okay, I'll take leave now.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
So participants, any questions from your side with regards to the assignments? Okay. So
Hello, ma'am.
yes.
Ma'am, you have mentioned about the unavailability of the video in the
Yes, yes.
e-content section.
Yes, it's not available. I'm not getting your video, Kanchan. Can you please
ma'am.
look into it?
Yes, ma'am. It seems to be due to the PDF format, I think.
Oh.
So I can resubmit it if you allow.
You just copy paste it in that comment section of the e-content. Do you see that comment box there?
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
You paste it there, okay? Even for the
Okay.
others also. Okay, then thank you so much.
Ma'am,
Yes,
ma'am,
yes,
I
go
have
ahead.
one question.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. For the presentation, ma'am, I'm from the zoology group. And how much time we will get for the project proposal and for the e-content, ma'am, the total time?
Because see, the total duration I'm giving is 30 for the big group.
30 minutes.
So the choice is yours as per your understanding within the group. Then you can work out on how many minutes each. Okay.
Okay, 15 within 15 we can divide it for means 15 minutes and another 15 minutes. Both should be completed within 30 minutes, right, ma'am?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, okay.
And I just want to inform the group, there's a very sad news with regards to one of our teacher participant. He's Kerry Imle.
Kerry, yes, ma'am.
Yes, he's in bereavement now because his father passed away, last evening. So let us remember him in our prayers, and we'll try to help each other, okay? And
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
actually last time also, because it was too early, even Sir Tabor also, he was in bereavement because he lost his sister. That's why he was absent for 2 days now, on the 16th and 17th. So on humanitarian ground, like these are the things that we help our participants. Okay.
Yes, sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Akita?
Yes, ma'am.
Is Ma'am Seema still there with you in Pragriti?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, she tells about you.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am. One day I even showed when you were taking class. So yes, ma'am, your presentation, but no. So she keeps on telling about you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please convey my regards to her. Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sure.
I always remember her. We were together in the refresher course way back in 2008.
Yes, ma'am.
We're now old.
Yes, yes, yes. No, ma'am, you're young, ma'am.
No, not at all.
And both of you. Seema, ma'am, also.
Very pretty. I remember her. So pretty, really.
Yes, ma'am.
So anyway, I remember most of your colleagues also from other colleges also. It's really lovely to know so many of them. So anyway, we'll see tomorrow, okay?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Ma'am,
yeah. Okay.
Ma'am, I have one question about, ma'am, we have presentation on 3rd and 4th.
Yes.
So, ma'am, for the zoology, it will be like the way we take on 4th, right, ma'am?
Yeah, on the 4th.
Okay.
Okay.
4th. Okay. Thank you.
I'll put up more information in the thing in the Moodle. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
So, Ma'am Shaman, you wanted to ask something?
Ma'am, the same thing. I just wanted to know whether we'll be following the same order.
Yeah, same order,
like-
same order.
Okay.
So for the individuals, it'll be on the 3rd,
First day. Yeah.
3rd, or on Friday.
Yeah.
And along with you, I've just requested the linguistic group to be ready, no? Georgina and Zam.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Like just be ready for the 3rd. If time permits, then we'll try to complete yours also, huh? Yours and Zam on the 3rd.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, for us, I remember you mentioned that we will give 10 minutes, no, ma'am? 10 minutes each.
20, huh? In your case, 20, so 10, 10. Because 2 of you, no? Huh?
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
What about Manyung and Foster? Manyung and Foster?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Will you be ready on the thing on Friday? Just back up.
Okay, ma'am.
Just try to be ready.
We'll try, ma'am. Yeah.
Yes.
Just try to be ready. If we have time, why not finish, no? So that on Saturday, if you can finish early, it'll be good for you all, so that you can concentrate on your test.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. See you.